This is Bishop Craig in Lansing, and this is take one for the week of August 25. Peace be with you. This week I will conclude my first term as Bishop of the Northwest Lower Michigan Synod and begin my second. And I am mindful of how different these days are than they were 6 years ago. 6 years ago, Bishop Schleicher and I had spent 2 weeks together, and this week we had driven to places like East Jordan and New Era, and this week I've been mostly quiet and around. And beginning the 1st of September, Kathy and I were at Cross of Christ in Petoskey, and we visited every conference in the first 20 days before our installation. And this week, this Sunday, I have not been asked to preach anywhere. So I will be spending this week and much of next, I think, in prayer and in reading and in doing some writing and in being quiet and in listening to God. So probably a good way to begin a second term as bishop. We also will be watching, praying, hoping for some call processes that continue and that those bear good fruit. So I ask you to join me in praying for call processes as they unfold, and I look forward to telling you when I can tell you. So really all I want to reflect upon this week is the reading for Sunday, which is about guesting and hosting. Jesus loves to be at the table. I think it's his favorite place in Luke. Luke even tells us that some think Jesus is a glutton and a drunkard. He's at the table to teach. He's at the table to reprove some folks. He's at the table to encourage those who are at the margins. He eats with outcasts and sinners. And see, some of his favorite parables, like this one, are about banqueting. And so Jesus talks about guesting and hosting. And what Jesus says is when you go to a banquet, take the lowest place. So they say come up higher. And indeed, as I think about it, that is what Jesus did. He took the lowest place. I'm thinking of words of St. Paul, that though in the form of God, Jesus did not count equality with God as something to be exploited. So instead, he humbled himself and took the form of a slave, being born in human likeness. And being found in human likeness, he was obedient even to the point of death, even death on a cross. And that's who Jesus is. And when we are at our lowest place, Jesus comes and sits with us. And so as Christ's presence in the world, we can be like Jesus and go sit with others at their lowest place because Jesus came and sat with us. And when God says to Jesus, go up higher, like from the grave, from death, and Jesus is raised to new life, to the ultimate place, to the right hand of God, Jesus brings us with him. And that is the promise of baptism, that Jesus will bring us to the house of the Lord, where we will dwell forever. And in the meantime, Jesus brings us to his own table, where we receive Christ's own body and blood. And there, why is it on the screen? Hang on a minute. Sorry about this, but something's up.
Alert from Core Services UI Agent. Flash Player Auto Update Daemon is not optimized for your Mac.
Isn't that lovely? This is take one. Should we start all over again or leave it as it is? We're going to leave it as it is. Anyway, as I was saying, as Jesus gets raised up, he brings us with him. And that is the promise of baptism, that when Jesus is, that we with Christ will be raised from death to new life. And in the meantime, when we're at our lowest place, Jesus raises us up and brings us with him to his own table, where we feast on his own body and blood given and shed for you. At Christ's table, we are the ones who can never repay our host. And so, having been fed at Christ's table, we are the ones, that is the church, we are the ones who, as the church, can host those who will never repay us. It sounds so noble, but it's true that the church became the place in the early centuries that didn't reach out to young families, but reached out to the poor, to widows and orphans, to people without support. And that is how the church grew, by reaching out to the people who needed God most. And so in this advice about feasting, Jesus tells us who he is. And more than that, Jesus invites us to share in his very life by being like him, the way he would have us be. Again, I'm sorry for the interruption with the computer. This is take one. Peace be with you. I didn't click it.